Sweat beaded on my neck as a sweet, intoxicating scent filled the boardroom. 60 seconds. That's all it took to destroy 4 years of agonizing deception. I was the youngest junior partner at a cutthroat alpha-only firm, and right in front of the entire executive council, my heat just broke. For 4 years, my life was a meticulously constructed fortress of lies, built on a foundation of bitter synthetic pills and sheer unadulterated paranoia. In the high-stakes, hyper-aggressive world of Manhattan, private equity, biology is destiny. At Harrington and Cole, one of the most prestigious global investment firms on Wall Street, the rules were unspoken, but absolute alphas led betas managed, and omegas. Well, omegas didn't exist. Not here. We were considered too fragile, too emotionally volatile, and biologically unsuited for the brutal 80-hour work weeks and vicious boardroom bloodbaths. My name is Oliver, and I am an omega. To survive, I became a ghost in my own body. I didn't just hide my dynamic, I erased it. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., before the sun even grazed the East River, my routine began. It wasn't just a matter of spraying on some harsh, pine-scented cologne. I was under the private care of Dr. Harrison Avery, an underground specialist operating out of a discreet clinic in Tribeca. Dr. Avery provided me with military-grade blockers, a cocktail of synthetic beta-mimicking pheromones and heavy suppressants that effectively flatlined my hormonal cycle. The physical toll was excruciating. The pills known in unregulated circles as Aegis 7 tasted like battery acid and left me with chronic migraines and a persistent dull ache in my joints. But the results were undeniable. To the world, and more importantly, to the Executive Alpha Council at Harrington and Cole, I was Oliver Hayes, a ruthless, hyper-efficient beta, with a brilliant mind for distressed asset acquisitions. I was good at my job. In fact, I was exceptional. I brought in the historic $40 million buyout of Crescent Tech in my second year, a deal that caught the attention of Dominic Gallagher. Dominic was the CEO and the apex alpha of the firm, standing at 6'4" with piercing blue eyes and a commanding presence that could suffocate a room. Dominic was a force of nature. His natural scent, a sharp, intimidating blend of ozone dark roast coffee and winter frost, was enough to make weaker alphas bare their necks in submission. He was demanding, brilliant, and completely terrifying. Yet he became my mentor. He respected my relentless work ethic and my seemingly impartial beta logic. Little did he know my logic was fueled by sheer terror of being discovered. The turning point and the beginning of the end happened in October. I was up for a full partnership, a position that required unanimous approval from the 7-member Alpha Council. The final hurdle was the Q3 Strategy Summit, where I was slated to present a massive, controversial restructuring plan for a failing pharmaceutical giant, Nolan Price Bio. 2 weeks before the summit disaster struck, the FDA initiated a massive, unannounced crackdown on off-market hormone suppressants. Dr. Avery's clinic was raided. My supply of Aegis 7 was abruptly cut off. Panicked, I managed to secure a meeting with a shady secondary contact. Dr. Avery had once mentioned a man named Victor roaming the fringes of the pharmaceutical black market in Brooklyn. Victor sold me a substitute and experimental imported suppressant called Inhibitol X. It's stronger. Victor had warned me, in the dim light of his warehouse, his eyes darting nervously. But it's volatile. Your body has been in an artificial drought for 4 years, kid. If this new formula doesn't synthesize perfectly with your liver enzymes, it won't just stop working, it will trigger a rebound effect. A concentrated biological backlash. I didn't have a choice. I bought a 2-month supply. The first few days, the Inhibitol X seemed to work. The metallic taste was worse, and I felt a constant low-grade fever burning just beneath my skin, but my scent remained entirely neutralized. I pushed the physical discomfort down, burying it under spreadsheets, financial models, and rehearsed talking points. I told myself I just needed to survive the summit. Once I made partner, my position would be unassailable. I would have the wealth and power to disappear for a month, go to Europe, and reset my biology safely. But I had vastly underestimated the intelligence of the predators I worked with, specifically Carter Preston. Carter was a senior partner, a legacy alpha, whose family had been in finance for generations. He was arrogant, territorial, and he despised me. He hated that Dominic favored a beta over him. For weeks, Carter had been hovering near my desk, his nostrils occasionally flaring. He couldn't smell my omega nature. The pills were too strong for that. But alphas have an uncanny instinctual ability to sense when something is off. He sensed my sickness. He sensed my hidden weakness. 3 days before the summit, Carter casually bumped into me by the espresso machine. He leaned in close, invading my personal space in a blatant display of dominance. His scent, heavy with bitter cedar and aggression, made my skin crawl. "You're looking a little flushed these days, Oliver," Carter murmured, his eyes narrowing as they scanned my face. Working too hard or hiding something, just focused on the Nolan Price presentation. "Carter," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady and devoid of inflection, a perfect beta response. He smirked, taking a deliberate step back. "Right, we'll make sure you're at your best on Friday. The council is bringing in independent medical consultants to review the biotech assets. We need absolute perfection. No weak links." I didn't know it then, but Carter wasn't just taunting me. He had already set a trap. He had noticed my feverish sweating, the slight nervous tremors in my hands, and the way I instinctively guarded my scent glands. Carter didn't know I was an Omega, but he suspected I was abusing illegal stimulants to keep up with the alphas. He intended to expose me, humiliate me, and get me fired. The morning of the summit, I woke up feeling as though my blood had been replaced with hot lead. The inhibitolex was punishing my system. My temperature was hovering around 101 degrees. My vision was swimming with static, and an undeniable deep-seated ache was pulsing in my lower abdomen. It was a phantom cramp, a biological warning siren that I had successfully ignored for 4 years. Not today. I begged my body dry, swallowing 3 of the massive chalky pills. Just give me 12 more hours. I arrived at the Harrington and Cole skyscraper on Wall Street at 7 a.m. The executive boardroom was located on the 81st floor, a sprawling glass-encased panopticon that overlooked the sprawling concrete jungle below. At 10 a.m. sharp, the Alpha Council assembled. There were 7 of them sitting around a massive mahogany table like kings holding court. Dominic sat at the head, imposing and unreadable. Carter sat to his right, a predatory smile playing on his lips. The air in the room was thick, heavy, with a mixture of alpha pheromones, leather Scotch tobacco pine. It was an environment designed to intimidate to force submission from anyone who wasn't an apex predator. Normally my suppressants created an artificial wall in my mind, muting my biological response to their dominance. But today, the wall was cracking. As I stood at the head of the room, queuing up my presentation on the massive LED screen, a wave of dizziness hit me so hard, I had to grip the edge of the podium until my knuckles turned white. "Whenever you're ready, Oliver." Dominic's deep voice resonated through the room. Even his tone sent a sudden, inappropriate shiver down my spine. The pills were failing. I cleared my throat, forcing the professionalism back into my voice. "Gentlemen, Today we are looking at the aggressive restructuring of Nolan Price Bio, as you can see on slide 1. For the first 20 minutes, I operated on pure adrenaline. I dissected the financial records, outlined the hostile takeover strategy, and answered their aggressive questions with sharp, calculated precision. I was winning them over. Even Richard Bowman, the most conservative alpha on the board, was nodding in approval. But internally, a catastrophe was unfolding. The inhibitol X, clashing violently with my suppressed hormones, had triggered the exact rebound effect Victor warned me about. My body, starved of its natural cycle for 48 months, decided that it was not only going to initiate a heat, but it was going to do so with explosive, devastating force. It started with the heat flashes. Sweat began to pour down my back, soaking through my tailored Tom Ford shirt. The heavy alpha scents in the room, which usually just smelled like strong cologne, suddenly became agonizingly potent, triggering deep primal instincts I didn't know I possessed. Then came the pain. A sharp tearing sensation ripped through my abdomen, causing me to gasp audibly mid-sentence. "Oliver." Dominic leaned forward, his brow furrowing in genuine concern. "Are you unwell?" I'm fine, Dominic. Just a slight..." I trailed off, my vision blurred. The air conditioning in the room, usually kept at a freezing 66 degrees, felt entirely inadequate. Carter Preston leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "Actually, Dominic, I requested building maintenance to slightly elevate the temperature in here today, and I had the ventilation system localized, just to see how our prospective new partner handles the pressure." A twist of sheer horror coiled in my gut. Carter had intentionally compromised the room's ventilation, trapping all the heavy alpha pheromones inside to see if it would trigger the nervous breakdown he assumed I was on the verge of having due to stimulant abuse. He had inadvertently created the perfect storm to shatter my failing chemical barrier. I tried to speak, to excuse myself, to run for the door, but my knees buckled. I caught myself on the mahogany table, gasping for air. And then the dam broke. It didn't happen slowly. It happened in a single devastating heartbeat. The inhibitol X completely metabolized, entirely failing. 4 years of suppressed, highly concentrated omega biology rushed to the surface, violently overriding the synthetic blockers. A scent, my true scent, exploded into the enclosed, poorly ventilated boardroom. It was overwhelmingly sweet, a dense, intoxicating cloud of warm vanilla crushed honeycomb, and a sharp undertone of wild jasmine. It cut through the heavy alpha atmosphere like a glowing blade through dark water. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. Silence fell over the room. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of 7 alphas simultaneously drawing in a sharp breath. I looked up, terrified, my chest heaving, a flush of dark, unnatural heat spreading across my skin. Carter Preston dropped his expensive Mont Blanc pen. It clattered loudly against the wood. His eyes, previously filled with smug superiority, were now dilated, blown completely black with sudden, uncontrolled primal instinct. What is that?" Richard Bowman choked out, half standing from his chair, his hands gripping the table as a low, involuntary growl rumbled in his chest. They were businessmen, executives, billionaires, but in that singular second, stripped of polite society, they were just biological predators trapped in a locked room, with an omega entering a catastrophic, uncontrolled heat. "Oliver!" a voice snarled. I turned. Dominic Gallagher was standing. His chair had been pushed back so violently it tipped over, crashing onto the carpet. The CEO of Harrington & Cole, the man who prided himself on absolute self-control, was staring at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated possessiveness. His chest heaved, his fangs subtly descending, and his own scent, ozone and frost, spiked to suffocating levels, aggressively battling the other alphas in the room to claim dominance over my sudden, overwhelming sweetness. My legs gave out completely. I collapsed onto the carpeted floor, curling in on myself as the agonizing fever of a forced heat consumed me. The 4-year lie was over. I was a helpless Omega, drowning in my own scent, entirely at the mercy of an infuriated feral Alpha Council. Panic ripped through the 80-story airspace of the executive boardroom, the atmosphere transformed into a suffocating pressure cooker of conflicting pheromones. My own scent crushed honeycomb, and wild jasmine was a thick, heavy syrup clogging my throat, triggering a violent biological response from the men surrounding me. Carter Preston moved first. The expensive leather of his Oxfords scuffed violently against the Persian rug as he bypassed the mahogany table. His eyes were locked on my trembling form with a glassy, dilated stare. He wasn't Carter the senior partner anymore. He was a biological machine responding to an overwhelming archaic trigger. His lips peeled back, exposing his canines, and a low guttural sound vibrated in his chest. "Mine!" Carter rasped, reaching out with a hand that was visibly shaking with adrenaline. Before his fingers could graze my damp shirt, a heavy, solid mass slammed into him. The sound of tearing wool and a sickening crunch of bone against glass shattered the heavy silence. Dominic Gallagher had crossed the room with terrifying speed. He gripped Carter by the collar of his bespoke suit and slammed him against the reinforced glass wall overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "Stand down!" Dominic roared. It wasn't just a shout, it was an alpha command. It was a raw acoustic resonance that vibrated in the chest cavity designed by evolution to force an immediate physiological submission response. Carter choked his hands, instinctively coming up to claw at Dominic's wrists. A thick stream of crimson blood poured from Carter's nose, his capillaries bursting from the sheer atmospheric pressure of Dominic's aggressive, suffocating scent spike. The smell of ozone and winter frost became so intense it burned the back of my throat, forcing the other 5 alphas in the room to stagger backward, coughing and gripping the edges of the table for support. Richard Bowman, the oldest member of the board, collapsed into his chair, gasping for air. His hands pressed tightly over his ears. "Security!" Dominic barked over his shoulder, not breaking eye contact with Carter. "Level 80 lockdown. Now!" He threw Carter to the floor. Carter hit the carpet hard, curling into a fetal position, his hands clutching his bleeding face, entirely neutralized by Dominic's dominance. Dominic turned to me. His chest was heaving beneath his starched cotton shirt, the fabric strained over his broad shoulders. He took a slow, deliberate step toward where I lay, collapsed on the floor. Every instinct in my fever-addled brain screamed at me to bare my neck to submit to the apex in the room. The inhibitol X withdrawal was tearing my nervous system apart. Searing cramps ripped through my lower abdomen, making me dry heave into the carpet. Dominic didn't touch my skin. Instead, he stripped off his suit jacket and threw it over my head and shoulders. The heavy fabric was saturated with his personal scent, dark roast coffee ozone, and expensive dry cleaning fluid. It acted as a temporary shield, masking my sweet scent from the rest of the room and providing a dark, insulated cocoon that immediately dialed back my panic. "Breathe, Oliver." Dominic muttered his voice, a low, rough gravel near my ear. He crouched beside me, keeping his body positioned between me and the rest of the board. "I've triggered the emergency protocols. The extraction team is 2 minutes out." The heavy oak doors of the boardroom burst open. It wasn't the standard building security. It was a private, heavily armed detail from Garda World, flanked by a specialized discrete trauma unit from New York Presbyterian. They were entirely beta, equipped with heavy-duty respirators and carrying neutralizing chemical sprays. "Clear the room," the lead paramedic shouted, his voice muffled behind a thick rubber mask. The security contractors forcefully escorted the disoriented alphas out into the hallway, dragging Carter by his armpits. Dominic refused to leave. He stood over the paramedics as they lifted me onto a collapsible stretcher, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscle ticked under his skin. "Push 80 milligrams of pure suppressants, IV drip stat," the paramedic ordered his partner as they strapped me down. "His core temperature is spiking past 103. We need to get him to the VIP ward before his central nervous system completely shuts down." The needle pierced the vein in the back of my hand. A cold metallic rush of saline and chemical suppressants flooded my bloodstream. The transition from the boardroom to the private elevator was a blur of fluorescent lights passing overhead, the rhythmic squeak of rubber wheels on linoleum, and the distant wailing sirens of Wall Street. As the heavy steel doors of the service elevator closed, shutting out the chaos, I looked up. Dominic was standing in the corner of the elevator cab. His arms crossed his eyes, fixed on my monitors. The intense frost in his scent had dialed back, replaced by a heavy protective blanket of ozone. The world tilted on its axis, the synthetic chemicals finally overriding the violent heat, and everything faded into a thick, dreamless black. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the sharp, sterile scent of bleach and the rhythmic electronic beeping of a heart monitor. I opened my eyes. The blinding sunlight filtering through the window blinds confirmed it was morning. I was lying in a wide mechanical bed, equipped with pristine, high-thread count sheets. The room was expansive, featuring a private sitting area and a panoramic view of the East River. I recognized the layout. I was in the secure VIP wing of the Weill Cornell Medical Center. A heavy, grounding scent of dark coffee and ozone lingered in the air. I turned my head. Dominic Gallagher was sitting in a leather recliner in the corner of the room. He looked ragged. His tie was missing. His dress shirt was wrinkled, and a dark shadow of stubble covered his jawline. He had a thick legal dossier open on his lap, tapping a silver pen against the margin. He looked up as I shifted against the pillows. 72 hours, Dominic said, quietly, closing the file. His voice was completely devoid of its usual aggressive corporate timbre. It was flat, exhausted. "That's how long you've been unconscious. The doctors said the black market suppressants you were taking had heavily toxified your liver. You're lucky you didn't suffer total organ failure." A hollow ache settled behind my sternum, tight and restricting. The lie was exposed. My career was dead. 4 years of 80-hour weeks, the missed holidays, the relentless grind, all of it dissolved into ash. "I'll have my resignation drafted and sent to HR by noon." I said, my voice hoarse and raspy from disuse. I stared at the IV line taped to my hand, refusing to meet his eyes. "You won't have to deal with the PR fallout. Tell the board I suffered a sudden neurological breakdown. Keep my dynamic out of the press." Dominic let out a harsh, humorless laugh. He tossed the thick dossier onto the foot of my bed. It landed with a heavy thud. "You aren't resigning, Oliver," Dominic stated, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. "And Carter Preston is currently sitting in a federal holding cell, awaiting indictment for corporate espionage." My head snapped up. The sudden movement sent a spike of pain through my temples. "What?" "Carter didn't tamper with the ventilation system just to humiliate you." Dominic explained, his blue eyes hardening into chips of ice. "He knew you were hiding something, and he needed a major distraction. While you were collapsing in the boardroom, sending every alpha in the room into a biological frenzy, Carter was attempting to upload the proprietary Nolan Price biotechnology schematics to an encrypted server. He was selling the entire restructuring plan to an acquisitions team at Goldman Sachs. I blinked, processing the information. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. He used my breakdown as a smokescreen. Exactly. But I caught the data breach on the internal security logs right before I threw him against the glass. Dominic said, "Carter is finished. He's facing 10 to 15 years in federal prison." I slumped back against the pillows, a strange, hysterical relief washing over me. But the relief was short-lived. "That doesn't change my situation, Dominic. The Alpha Council knows what I am. They saw it. They smelled it. I breached the firm's trust." Dominic stood up and walked to the edge of the bed. Harrington & Cole was founded in 1922. The corporate charter contains an archaic morality clause. It strictly prohibits an unbonded Omega from holding equity or a partnership position. It's an illegal, outdated bylaw, but if we fight it in court, your medical history and dynamic will become a matter of public record. Wall Street will tear you apart. "So I'm out," I concluded, the bitter taste of defeat coating my tongue. "No," Dominic corrected his voice, dropping an octave, the heavy scent of ozone thickening in the sterile hospital room. "The clause specifies an unbonded Omega. There is a loophole. If an Omega is officially claimed by an Alpha who already holds majority shareholder status within the firm, the board cannot legally terminate them without triggering a catastrophic payout and a hostile takeover bid." I stared at him, the silence stretching out heavy and suffocating. I processed the legal jargon, stripping away the corporate speak, to reveal the raw biological reality of what he was suggesting. "You are proposing a bond," I said slowly, testing the weight of the words. "A permanent biological claim to save my job." Dominic didn't flinch. "I am proposing an alliance, a merger. You are the brightest financial mind I have seen in a decade. I refuse to lose my best asset to a biological technicality, and I refuse to let Richard Bowman and the rest of those archaic dinosaurs run you out of the firm you helped build." "A bond is permanent, Dominic." I shot back my heart, hammering against my ribs. "It dictates biology. It alters neurochemistry. I spent 4 years poisoning myself to avoid being subservient to an Alpha, and you're asking me to voluntarily put a collar around my own neck." Dominic stepped closer, leaning over the bed rails. The proximity was overwhelming. His scent was no longer just professional. It was deeply personal, searching, testing the edges of my own recovering pheromones. "I am not Carter. I do not want a subservient mate." Dominic said, his eyes burning with intense, terrifying sincerity. "I want a partner. You will retain your position. You will take Carter's vacated corner office. You will receive your 15% equity stake. We draw up an ironclad prenuptial and bonding contract. I will provide the biological protection you need to operate safely within the firm, and in return, you stay by my side, and we dominate Wall Street together." It was a business proposition, cold, calculated, and ruthlessly pragmatic. Yet underneath the layers of corporate strategy, there was an undeniable primal tension vibrating between us. He wanted my mind, yes, but the dark flush on his neck and the slight descent of his fangs told me he wanted the rest of me too. I looked at the dossier on my bed, then up at the Manhattan skyline, visible through the window. I had clawed my way to the top of a world designed to crush me. I wasn't going to walk away now. If survival meant negotiating the terms of my own surrender, I would ensure the contract was entirely in my favor. "I want Carter's corner office," I said, my voice steady, the tremor finally leaving my hands. I want full autonomy over the Nolan Price restructuring. And if you ever try to use the Alpha command on me, outside of a life-threatening emergency, I will liquidate my shares and burn the firm to the ground." A slow, predatory smile spread across Dominic's face. The tension in his shoulders finally released. "Agreed." He leaned down. The movement was deliberate, broadcasting his intentions clearly so I wouldn't flinch. He pushed the collar of my hospital gown aside, exposing the sensitive skin of my scent gland, right where my neck met my shoulder. "Hold still, Oliver," he murmured, his breath hot against my skin. I gripped the cold metal rails of the hospital bed as his teeth broke the surface of my skin. A sharp, searing pinch of pain was instantly swallowed by an overwhelming, intoxicating rush of endorphins. The metallic tang of blood filled the air, quickly overpowered, as his heavy, dark roast and ozone scent flooded directly into my bloodstream, permanently weaving itself into my own vanilla and honeycomb. The heat faded. The paranoia dissolved. The 4-year lie was dead, replaced by a ruthless new reality. I was no longer a ghost hiding in a beta's shadow. I was Oliver Hayes' partner at Harrington, and Cole, and I had just secured my empire. Did Oliver make the right choice, tying himself to Dominic to secure his corporate empire? Or did he just trade one gilded cage for another? Drop your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this intense, grounded dive into corporate Omegaverse drama, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh, high-stakes stories every single week. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a twist, and share this video with a friend who loves ruthless plots